Hey, I hope you guys are doing good today. We are going to be watching Ancient Roman Garum Revisited, and I know this one has been suggested to me, and I figured this is a good time to watch it since I'm sure we'll see more of his recipes that do use it, so here we are. If you do get a chance, I'd appreciate if you can leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch, and I will have Max's video linked in my description below, so be sure to give him a like and subscribe as well. He does an amazing job with his channel. Absolutely love him. All right. Let's get on into it.
Have you ever asked yourself what would happen if I left 8 pounds of fish and 1 pound of salt to sit in a jar in the sun for 2 months?
No, I have never asked myself that. Oh my gosh. I don't know, like, what would this end up smelling like? Oh gosh, this sounds stinky.
Well, of course you have. Well, the answer is you'd make garum, the fermented fish sauce of ancient Rome. So thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video as I make true fermented garum, this time on Tasting History.
Oh my gosh.
So what exactly is garum? Well, one 7th century author, Isidore of Seville, said, "Garum is a salted liquid of fish, which formerly was made from the fish that the Greeks called garos. And although it is now made from an infinite variety of fish, it retains the original name that it had at its beginning." But I feel Isidore had never actually seen the product being made, because yes, it is a salted liquid of fish, but it's how you get to that product that is so interesting. Now, the Roman poet Marcus Manilius, he did write about the process of taking fish and salt and putting them in a terracotta vat and letting them ferment. And then, being a poet, he describes the end result in some flourishing language. Their inward parts melt and issue forth as a stream of decomposition. Here a precious exudate flows out, which vomits up the flour of the gore, and mixed with salt balances taste in the mouth.
I mean, this is very, very well written. This is very it's very descriptive. Very, very descriptive. I absolutely love this though. I absolutely love how this is written. I like it. We need to bring this kind of writing back, honestly, because this is great.
Flour of the gore, and mixed with salt balances taste in the mouth. Yeah. That's what I'm about to make. It's actually that stream of decomposition that I'm going for. And to make that, I needed to find a proper ancient recipe. Now, 3.5 years ago, shortly after I started this channel, I did a video on garum. In fact, it's how most people found this channel. It's why I made a t-shirt that says, "You had me at garum." But it was the beginning of the pandemic and I was living in a tiny little condo, so I wasn't about to ferment a bunch of fish in my condo because I'm not that crazy. So instead...
That is very nice of him to do because I don't know how this is going to smell. So I feel like that was very nice of him. Very, very nice.
So I wasn't about to ferment a bunch of fish in my condo because I'm not that crazy. So instead, I followed a recipe for quick garum, which did come from an ancient document called Geoponica, which is a treatise on farming. And the Geoponica also has some more traditional ways of making garum. The Bithynians make it thus. Take preferably small or large mendole, or if none, anchovy or scad or mackerel, and put them into a baker's bowl of the kind in which dough is kneaded. To 1 modius of fish, knead in 6 Italian pints of salt so that it is well mixed with the fish. Put it in an earthenware vessel and leave it uncovered in the sun for 2 or 3 months, occasionally stirring with a stick, then take the fluid, cover, and store. And
I just feel like this is going to be so stinky. I mean, letting it sit in the sun like this for 2 to 3 months, this just sounds smelly. But I'm sure the end result is great. But at the same time, I feel like this is so stinky.
Occasionally stirring with a stick, then take the fluid, cover, and store. And that is what I am doing. Also, I really have to thank culinary historian Sally Granger for helping me through the process and ensuring that I don't poison myself at the end of this episode.
That is very nice. That is very, very nice. We definitely don't want that. We do not want that.
Helping me through the process and ensuring that I don't poison myself at the end of this episode. So for this recipe, all you need is fish and salt, but it's the ratio that is so important. 1 modius of fish to 6 Italian pints of salt. Unfortunately, it's hard to buy fish by the Modius these days, but it comes out to be an 8-to-1 ratio, or 12.5% salinity at the end of the process.
Okay.
And it's important to hit that because that's going to kill pretty much all of the bad bacteria that you don't want in this condiment.
So that ratio is actually really, really important then. Yeah, because we definitely don't want any bad bacteria living.
Bacteria that you don't want in this condiment. Now, most modern fish sauces have even a higher salinity, 25 to 35% in some cases, but I am going to go with the ancient Roman percentages. Do not make this. Leave this to me. Watch and be satisfied with this. Do not make it. But
that is fair. You know what? That is fair. We will be his cheerleaders because I don't think I would want to make this, but I think it is very interesting. I think it's very fascinating to see stuff like this getting made. But yes, I will more than likely, I am more than happy to be a cheerleader. Go, Max, go.
Make this. Leave this to me. Watch and be satisfied with this. Do not make it. But if you do want to try garum, I will put links to where you can get certain modern versions of garum that are made. Definitely not poisonous. It's what I use here on the channel very often. So I'll put links to that down there. But this version...
That's actually really nice. I don't know if I've ever had garum, to be honest. Like I'm trying to think, but I don't think I've ever had anything that has it in it.
Here on the channel very often. So I'll put links to that down there. But this version, leave it to me. So first I went to my local fish market to buy the freshest fish that I could find. They didn't have the suggested mendole or scad or anchovy, but they did have mackerel, so that's what I ended up getting, 8 pounds of it, and then 1 pound of the finest Italian sea salt that I could find. Then I chopped up the fish into large pieces. What I did not do is clean the fish, gut the fish, because you want the enzymes that are in the digestive tract of the fish to be in the jar, because that's actually what's going to do a lot of the breaking down for you. So I chopped up the fish and started to add them to the jar along with the salt, and I wanted to make sure that the salt was rubbed into each piece of fish before dropping it in. Now I'm using a glass jar because I want to see the process as it goes, but more historical would be a terracotta jar of some sort. Once the fish and salt were added, I gave it a good plunging or two to make sure that everything was mixed together. What I did not add was any kind of liquid, so it's actually kind of hard to get it mixed together without liquid. Then I set it out in the sun and...
It looks very chunky. I am interested to see what this is gonna look like. I mean, like we saw his picture at the beginning of the video, but I am kind of interested to see if he does like maybe like a time lapse or something, so we can kind of see like how it breaks down, or maybe he has like pictures or something. It would be kind of interesting to see.
Kind of hard to get it mixed together without liquid. Then I set it out in the sun, and I did cover mine because I didn't want any critters getting into it. We got raccoons. But I was opening the jar several times a day to make sure that enough oxygen was getting in, which helps to stop botulism. Now, before I said all that you needed was fish and salt, but really you also need a third ingredient, and that is time, specifically time out in the sun, at least 2 months out in the sun. So if you're looking for something that's not going to take 2 months, might I suggest a meal from today's sponsor, Factor. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen meals right to your door, and they are fully prepared. Now, I love to cook, obviously, and I've used HelloFresh for a long time, but HelloFresh, which now owns Factor, knows that sometimes you don't have time to cook at all. So they have Factor to deliver fully prepared meals to your door, and I've actually been using them for years, long before I started tasting history. When I was working a job where I actually had to leave the house, I would bring Factor meals to lunch every single day pretty much. Because they're never frozen, they just take a couple minutes to heat up either in the microwave or just a few minutes in the oven. And they have loads of options, over 35 different selections every single week, and they have options that are meat and pescatarian, keto, vegetarian, they got it all. So to give Factor a try, go to factor75.com or click the link in the description and use my code TASTINGHISTORY50 to get 50% off of your first Factor box. That's 50% using TASTINGHISTORY50 at factor75.com. Now, while Factor may offer you a meal in an instant, the same cannot be said for garum, because, like I said, it takes 2 months, but it is an active 2 months. The day after I set the jar out, I got to mixing. And the first thing that I noticed was there was a lot more liquid.
There's a lot of liquid. That was just from a day? That's a lot of liquid that happened.
To mixing. And the first thing that I noticed...
Well, that's a lot. Like that's actually really impressive. I didn't think it was going to be this much, but it really got to work very, very quickly.
There was a lot more liquid. It turns out that the salt that is added by osmosis draws the liquid out of the fish's flesh, and so it became a lot easier to stir even by day 2. And every day I would go out at least once, preferably twice a day, and mix the garum. And within just 4 or 5 days, I noticed that the fish really stared to break down.
Oh,
Fins
yeah.
were falling off, bones were sticking out.
That's actually really interesting to see that. I mean, this is like really, really fast. I feel like the breakdown of this, and I'm like obviously like the salt in here is helping, but I didn't think it was going to be this quick, honestly.
It was something out of a horror film. But it wasn't until a little bit later, about at the 2.5 week mark, that the fish were no longer recognizable as fish. There were still some bones, yes, but overall it was a thick brownish gray liquid that had a golden sheen of fat floating on top. Something reminiscent of a liquid that you'd see flowing out of a sewer pipe. Now, does that look nasty? Yes, it does. But what would...
I mean, it really doesn't look appetizing, but at the same time, I mean, it's a process. It's a process, and sometimes the process is a little bit ugly, and that's okay.
See flowing out of a sewer pipe. Now, does that look nasty? Yes, it does. But what was shocking was the odor, or rather lack thereof. It did smell. It had a very strong smell, but it smelled like a fish market. If you go to a fish market and you just kind of get that fish smell, that's what it smelled like.
Okay, see, like that's what I was like very, very curious about, because I feel like when you think about fish sitting out and kind of decomposing, you think it's going to stink, like not like a fish market, because like a fish market kind of smells like fresh fish, right? So it's not like terrible, but I thought it was going to be kind of like rancid smelling, I guess, maybe, or just really stinky. But the fact that he said, you know, that it's not that strong and it kind of smells like a fish market, that's actually kind of cool. It's actually kind of cool. And I would be very thankful for this.
Like a fish market. If you go to a fish market and you just kind of get that fish smell, that's what it smelled like pretty much all the way through the process. I expected it to be putrid and kind of rotten smelling, but it wasn't. One of my favorite things to do all summer was to invite friends over to look at the garum and to smell it. And, you know, it was...
Be like, smell it. It doesn't even smell bad. I wish I was a friend. You know what? I would 100% support this, and I'd be like, yes, let me smell, let me smell it.
Summer was to invite friends over to look at the garum and to smell it. And, you know, it was always kind of shocking that it didn't smell nearly as bad as it looked. Though there were actually laws in ancient Rome that dictated that these garum factories had to be a certain distance from population centers because the smell was so bad. So I was a little worried that I was missing something, but we'll come back to that. So my summer was spent mixing garum every morning and every afternoon. I felt like the Dunkin' Donuts guy. Time to mix the garum. And every day it got a little more liquidy and a little less fish sludgy. And every day I expected the stench to hit, but it didn't until it came time to strain it. After a little over 2 months, I dipped a ladle in to pull out the brown sludge, and the moment that it came above the jar, tears welled up in my eyes.
Oh my God. Oh no. Okay. And there it is. And there it is. The stank. The stank has arrived.
Above the jar, tears welled up in my eyes.
Flames on the side of my face.
And I knew right away why there were laws about this being made away from towns. Because it was potent. Now, it didn't smell like rotten fish. It was like stinging, like that stinging burn in the nostrils when you smell something fermented. So I think that I knew that I had done something right. So I soldiered on. I had put in 2 months of work and I wasn't about to give up. So I kept going. What I didn't understand was how possibly that brown gray sludge was going to turn into the beautiful clear amber-colored liquid that liquamen, which is the end product that we're making, is supposed to be like. Now for the straining, the Geoponica says, a deep, close-woven basket is inserted into the center of the jar containing these fish, and the liquid flows into the basket, and so liquamen is obtained, filtered through the basket. And I suppose if you have a really close-woven basket, you could do it in one step. I'm not exactly sure how, with all the sludge and everything, but maybe, but I ended up having to do it a few times, and I tried a few different mediums. I started with just a regular mesh strainer and then graduated to several layers of cheesecloth, and it strained out most of the big pieces, and it became kind of this fish paste, which is known as alec, which they actually used culinarily as well. But the liquid that was left behind was still really cloudy.
That's kind of cool though, because now you get a couple things out of this, so it's kind of like more stuff gets used from it. That is kind of nice.
Used culinarily as well. But the liquid that was left behind was still really cloudy, and it just didn't look like something I wanted to put in my body. So I graduated to a coffee filter, and then finally, and probably most useful, finely woven muslin. And I passed it through that a few times, and it came through painfully slow, just drops. But what came out was indeed the clear amber-colored liquid that I was hoping to get. And while I strain enough to actually get a taste, let me tell you a little bit more about the history of garum. So as I mentioned, I have already done a video talking about the history of garum way back when I started the channel before I had a beard. Truly, tasting history is the house that garum built. But since then, I have found so much more new information. So while some of this may overlap with that original video, most everything is actually new information. So why garum? Why were the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks just obsessed with this fish sauce? The answer is salt. Salt was used very often as a preservative, but very rarely was it mentioned as an ingredient in food. But being human, they still loved that salty taste. As Pliny the Elder says, in innumerable seasonings it is the taste of salt that predominates, and it is looked for when we eat garum. So it was just a different, more complex way of salting your food. Even today, many Asian countries still produce fish sauce for just that reason. And not only fish, but also soy sauce. It's the same idea, a way to add a saltiness, umami-ish, is that a word? Umami-ish flavor to...
Yeah. I definitely see what he's saying here, and that does make a lot of sense though, of just a different way to add some salt into your food, because like salt in food is kind of a necessity, and some things are really good when they're a little bit more salty, so it totally makes sense.
Fish, but also soy sauce. It's the same idea, a way to add a saltiness, umami-ish, is that a word? Umami-ish flavor to your food. It's just so much more complex than just adding salt. In fact, when it comes to soy sauce, it's likely that it was used as a vegetarian alternative to a Japanese fish sauce called gyosho. It could be made with all sorts of...
That actually makes a lot of sense. That if you wanted like a vegetarian version, or like maybe, like that would be a good alternative, like when you didn't have fish.
Alternative to a Japanese fish sauce called gyosho. It could be made with all sorts of fish, but the most prized versions were actually made from squid. And it turns out that garum too could be made with seafood other than fish. Garum could also be flavored with different herbs like oregano. There's actually a recipe attributed to Gargilius Martialis which calls for layers of salt and fish and herbs, though even he lived in the 3rd century, but it's likely that the recipe was altered much, much later because it mentions spices as well, like cinnamon and clove. And that recipe also says to let it rest for 7 days in the sun, then mix the sauce daily for 20 days. After that time, it becomes a liquid. And I gotta say, I don't really think that's long enough, but who knows? I haven't tried it. Now,
yeah, I mean, 2 months to 20 days is a big difference as far as like fermenting something goes. So yeah. That definitely doesn't sound like it's quite long enough, but yeah, I would definitely feel a little wary of that one.
Now, what I am trying today is a homemade garum, which is good, but it's not the best. The ancients write about what is the best garum, and it was called Garum Sociorum, or garum of allies, garum of friends, and it was made from all mackerel that came from southern Spain and northern Africa. Nowadays, the most prized garum is made from mackerel in the fisheries of Carthage. It is called Sociorum. 1,000 sesterces are paid for 2 congi of this exquisite liquor. Hardly any other liquid other than perfumes command such a price. Marcus Apicius thought it especially desirable for mullets to be drowned in a bath of Garum Sociorum. And it was this Garum Sociorum that the poet Martial suggested as a wonderful gift to be given during the mid-December festival of Saturnalia, which celebrated the agricultural god Saturn and included gift-giving. And he says that when you send this gift, you should include an epigram. Accept this exquisite garum made from the first blood spilt of mackerel still breathing its last. An expensive gift. Though I don't think it's very classy to tell people that it's an expensive gift when you give it.
True. That is true. I mean, you could, but you'll end up being that person, right? It's like, here, have this really, really expensive gift that I'm giving you. You know, that is a very good point.
Though I don't think it's very classy to tell people that it's an
Very
expensive
humble,
gift
right?
when you give it. But it was an expensive gift because Pliny said that it was 1,000 sesterces for 2 congi. That's about 1 year's pay for the average Roman legionary at the time. That's a lot of money, and not everyone could afford that. Luckily, Martial has an epigram to be sent if you're sending less quality garum. Inferior garum. I confess it, the...
Damn, inferior garum. What a way to start that one. Damn.
Less quality garum. Inferior garum. I confess it, the offspring of the tunny fish of Antipolis. Had I been that of a mackerel, I should not have been sent to you. But that makes it seem that you sent this inferior garum not because you couldn't afford the Garum Sociorum, but rather if you had got the good garum, you would have kept it for yourself. Yet even while garum was prized, some calling it the most noble of liquors, its pungency made it for an easy punching bag for the ancient Roman authors. Martial has an epigram about the eating habits of his friend Baeticus. Neither mullet, Baeticus, nor turtle dove delights you, nor is hare ever acceptable to you, or wild boar, nor do sweet meats please you, or slices of cake. Instead, you devour capers and onions swimming in disgusting garum, and the soft part of a gammon of bacon whose freshness is questionable.
Whose freshness is questionable. You know what? Some people just like what they like, you know? They just like what they like.
I suspect that there must be some other more secret vice in your stomach, for why, Baeticus, do you eat such disgusting things? Though my favorite of his garum-deriding epigrams is to his friend Flaccus. You are a man of iron, Flaccus, if you are able to make love to a woman after she has had 6 helpings of garum. Garum was so potent that sometimes even animals shied away. Columella, in his treatise on agriculture, wrote, "Great care must be taken by the man in charge who feeds the bees when he must handle the hives, that the day before he has abstained from sexual relations and garum and all the liquids which accompany it." But while the ancient writers love to poke fun at garum, it's clear that they also love the stuff because they're always talking about where the best garum came from. Some said that it came from the Black Sea, others from what is now Spain. But one of the most famous garum-producing cities was actually Pompeii, and we even know the name of one of the top manufacturers who lived there, Aulus Scaurus. Bottles with his mark on them are found all over the Mediterranean, and a full 1/3 of the garum bottles found in the sites of Pompeii and Herculaneum came from him.
That's cool. I think that that's really cool. This is like where history, I think, ends up being so fascinating to me, is that, you know, when you are able to go back this far and you can kind of trace things this far and find things like this is why history is so awesome.
1/3 of the garum bottles found in the sites of Pompeii and Herculaneum came from him. It's also from his workshop that there was found a famous mosaic that bears a label which translates to the flower of garum, made of the mackerel, a product of Scaurus, from the shop of Scaurus. Though he also offered a product called the flour of liquamen, which would infer that at that time, garum and liquamen were two different things. Now, throughout history, the terms sometimes have been used synonymously, but by the early empire, it does seem that they were slightly different products. It's possible that liquamen referred to what we're making today, and then garum was made with more of the blood and viscera of fish, and so it was a darker color and more pungent. But it's not exactly certain. And as time goes on, other words begin to pop up that are referring to this same fish sauce. Around the year 390, the Roman poet Ausonius wrote to his student thanking him for a gift of some fish sauce from Barcelona. He says that it's called muria, but complains that the term muria is hard for him to pronounce and that he prefers the older term garum. But by whatever name that liquor of allies is called, I'll flood my plate. This juice, too little used by our forefathers, must overflow the spoon. And when he says too little used by our forefathers, he surely isn't meaning those people who lived during the Roman Republic and early empire, because garum was everywhere. But by the end of the 2nd century, garum factories had begun to dwindle in the Roman Empire. People probably began having to make it at home or not use it at all as an ingredient. But by the end of the Roman Empire, we see it mostly being used as a medicine. It's found in numerous medical texts going back for centuries, and it could be used to heal burns, cure ulcers, and even treat the bites of dogs and crocodiles. And if you're feeling a little backed up, garum was a go-to laxative. Again, the bowels...
Hey, you know what? This seems like a one-size-fits-all thing. You know, just put some garum on it.
Crocodiles. And if you're feeling a little backed up, garum was a go-to laxative. Again, the bowels are moved by leavened bread, fat small birds, snails, garum, pickled fish, and about 50 other things.
Yeah.
Now, Columella says that if your horse is having too much phlegm, then pouring some garum into the horse's nostril will help to alleviate that problem. A garum neti pot. Ugh. The 1st century physician Dioscorides really fanboyed over the stuff, saying that it could treat all sorts of things. If you had sores in your mouth, you could swish garum around and it would fix them. And garum applied represses gangrenous ulcers in the cheeks, heals those bitten by dogs, and is sometimes given as a suppository for dysentery and sciatica. Fortunately for me, this is tasting history, so a garum suppository is not in my future.
Hey, you know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. You know, he does make a good point that, you know, we definitely are tasting history, not trying medical history. So, oh my gosh. But like, when you think about it, back then, it definitely kind of seems like once they found something that maybe stuck, they kind of just took it and ran with it. So, fair enough. Fair enough.
For me, this is tasting history, so a garum suppository is not in my future. But I will be tasting the stuff. So after many hours, all weekend actually, I had finally strained enough liquid to fill a full bottle of liquamen, or garum, the fish sauce of ancient Rome. Now I'm going to taste this garum just plain, but that's not how it would have been eaten. It's meant to be an ingredient. Sometimes it would be made into different sauces. It would be mixed with vinegar to make oxygarum, or oinigarum, which was mixing it with wine. That was a very common way of having it, or else just mixed into like a marinade or something else. But I'm just having it plain.
I love this bottle he has with it. The little fish bottle. I love it. I love it.
Something else, but I'm just having it plain. So it smells fishy yet sweet and briny. Interesting. Let's give it a try. Just a spoonful of garum makes the breakfast come up. Hopefully not on camera. Wish me luck. Oh, interesting. Oh, that's very, very different than the other garum. So I've had this before. Yeah, you wouldn't want to kiss me after that. That is potent. But it's almost got some spice to it, like a little burn in a good way. And it's not fishy. It's meaty.
Meaty. That is an interesting way to describe it. I like how, I mean, honestly, he does a really good job at describing how things taste, especially when they're very hard to describe too, like at the same time. Because I feel like this one seems like maybe a harder one to try to like give us some sort of impression on how it actually tastes. So I think he's doing a good job though. But that doesn't seem like that's what maybe we would have expected from it.
It's meaty, and it's kind of it feels not acidic. It's pungent. It's just like, and it kind of draws all of the liquid out of your mouth, kind of mouth drying. There's a word for that. Can't remember what it is, but that's what it's doing. Now, what's really interesting is it is not nearly as salty as the other types of garum that I've had, or any East Asian fish sauce or soy sauce, which are really, really salty. This has a mild saltiness, so you're actually getting more flavor than the saltiness, which is interesting.
That would probably explain why people liked it so much though, because you have like a little bit of salty in there, you have flavor, and if you could add this to lots of different types of meals, food, stews, marinades, whatever, like during that time, I could definitely understand why it was so popular for sure.
So you're actually getting more flavor than the saltiness, which is interesting. Now, had this garum gone off, I'm not exactly sure how you know if it's gone off, but Apicius says that if your garum has gone off, he has a recipe to fix it, to make it good garum again. To correct garum, if the garum develops a bad odor, invert an empty container, smoke it with burning bay and cypress wood, then pour in it the garum that has previously been exposed to the air. If it is too salty, add a sextarius of honey and stir, and it will be adjusted. But fresh must also provides the same result. Now, if you are cooking from Apicius, who was the major ancient Roman cooking author that we still have works from, you need garum or liquamen because it's in almost every single recipe that he has. It's in all of the sauces that he mentions, and when people talk about garum being the ketchup of ancient Rome, it's actually those sauces that they're referring to. People weren't usually just eating the garum, but it's also in savory dishes and sweet dishes. There's even a dessert, patina.
That's actually interesting because like usually a lot of stuff like this, like it's kind of like a one or the other, like they kind of like have their lanes, but the fact that this one kind of branches out into so many different areas of cooking, it's pretty cool. That is actually really cool.
It's actually those sauces that they're referring to. People weren't usually just eating the garum, but it's also in savory dishes and sweet dishes. There's even a dessert, patina of pears, that's a sweet dish that uses fish sauce.
I would have never thought we would have had something like this. This doesn't sound bad though.
Patina of pears, that's a sweet dish that uses fish sauce. And I included it in my cookbook, so I'll probably need to do an episode where I actually make it on the show. So thank you again for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
I really enjoyed this video. I thought it was really cool. It's not very often that we get to see sauces or like sauce bases, I guess maybe, or like ingredients like this kind of on their own. And how much work and effort he put into this, I really appreciate too, because this seemed like it was a whole process, very long. I mean, obviously you need to dedicate 2 months, 2-3 months to this. So I really appreciate this. I think this was very cool. And it kind of gave me more insight of like soy sauce and other fish sauces and stuff like that, because I know that, I think I am a big enjoyer of soy sauce, and definitely like some other like fish sauces. So to kind of see how they kind of came about from garum, very cool. Very, very cool. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to go and like and subscribe to Tasting History with Max Miller. He does an absolutely amazing job. Love his channel. I always learn so much, and just I just love everything he does on here. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys had a great day, and I will see you in the next one.